Welcome, everyone, to Harness's inaugural DevSecOps Summit, an AI security summit for DevSecOps practitioners. My name is Rahul Sood. I'm the General Manager and Senior Vice President of Application Security here at Harness. I'm going to be your host for this exciting discussion with two leading practitioners and adopters of AI and AI security. This event is going to be really focused on three main themes that you will hear both in today's in my session, but also in subsequent sessions for the rest of the day. First is really about securing AI at a code and from a developer perspective and the entire SDLC. Second is securing AI native applications and AI native components used in these applications. And third, AI powered DevSecOps. Harness, as most of you know, is a leading developer or provider of DevSecOps platform. And something you may or may not know is we are also one of the leading providers of application security for DevSecOps. We have one of the broadest and most comprehensive portfolio of application security testing, which we like to call shift left, and runtime protection solutions, which we like to call shield right. Our security portfolio is really rooted in three core philosophies. Everything that we do has to be deeply integrated into DevOps pipeline and is not an afterthought or a standalone security solution. Second, providing true code to runtime visibility and intelligence in helping you prioritize and address critical vulnerabilities. And third, really leveraging AI and delivering an AI-powered solution. With that, let me now open up today's session and invite my two speakers to introduce themselves. Why don't we start with you, Sunil?
Sure. Thank you, Rahul, for having me as part of this panel. Definitely excited. As Rahul said, Sunil Agrawal. I'm the Chief Security Officer of Glean. Been in the security space for a good 25 plus years. And for folks who might not know about Glean, we started in 2019. We started as a B2B enterprise search. We used to call ourselves the Google for enterprise. Then when ChatGPT came about, we called ourselves the ChatGPT for enterprise. You ask a question and get back a response based on your enterprise data. And now the big focus is on agentic AI and providing AI to all the employee base. As you could imagine, we consider ourselves a Gen AI native company. So, security of Gen AI applications and at the same time using Gen AI for security. Both of the topics are top of mind for our customers, hence top of mind for us. So here I am. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunil. And for those of you who may not know, Sunil is also the author of 50 plus patents and is a very active blogger and often shares his perspective about security for AI era. So please follow him. Now let me introduce our second guest, Chaitanya. Over to you.
Thanks, Rahul. Hello, everyone. My name is Chaitanya Bhatt. Really excited to be part of this panel. Thanks for having me here. I am the head of product security and trust and safety at Intuit Credit Karma. Intuit Credit Karma is empowering more than 140 million members to make smarter financial decisions with free credit scores, monitoring, and personalized insights. I am responsible for managing the end-to-end SSDLC for applications at Credit Karma and responsible for managing the member trust. With the introduction of AI, I am also leading the enterprise-wide AI adoption and securing of AI applications at Credit Karma.
Thank you, Chaitanya, and thank you, Sunil, for being here. What I'm really excited about is the two of you, have a ringside sort of fence view to what's really happening with AI in your companies and AI security. But both your companies come at it from two very different perspectives. Glean being an AI native company, and Credit Karma being an AI forward company dealing with very sensitive information and trust, across hundreds of millions of consumers. So, just the two perspectives, I think, is going to make for a very fun conversation. So let me kick this off with sort of a lowball question to both of you. How is the role of security evolving in the era of AI? And love to hear your personal experiences because both of you have been in seat now for long enough to have seen this journey from start to where we are. So love to just hear from you how your roles have changed in, especially with the onset of AI.
Sure. So I would say from my perspective as a CISO, it's no more, saying no's, no more putting up gates to adoption of Gen AI. I mean, we consider ourselves Gen AI native company. So, we got to lean in, so it's more about providing the paved path, the guardrails, so that our employee base can know, what are the tools which they can use, how to use them safely. And now, here is where I would say the CISO needs to change. They need to be quite aware of what are the business use cases of Gen AI. Then go deep into that. What are the right set of tools to enable those business use cases and do it securely? And nowadays, it's just not about doing your third party risk management, the traditional way. You got to understand the functionality of the tools, the products, the services you are bringing in. You got to understand the entire ecosystem around it. Are they using Gen AI natively? Are they using foundational models from third party providers? What are the contractual agreements that the vendor that you are trying to bring in have with foundational models? Can you actually, if you have your relationship with the foundational model provider, can you use that relationship when using a third party? So, you got to bring in all of that and then provide a highly prescriptive way of using Gen AI within your enterprise. That's the only way to move forward, because if you put gates, your users will find a way around it, will go over it, and you will be less secure rather than more. So that's how I see that our CISOs need to be a lot more hands-on, a lot more ingrained with the rest of the company.
That's such a useful perspective, Sunil. Especially, I'm sure, as a tech provider, providing your technology to some of the leading, companies, heavily regulated industries, you also need to have, an AI governance policy that allows your customers to have faith and trust in Glean while allowing your users, being able to access the best tools and the best technology. So thank you for that perspective. Chaitanya, how has your life evolved or changed in the last 2 to 3 years as Credit Karma has accelerated its shift towards AI?
No, yeah, I think AI revolution is here. AI systems are not just generating codes; they are making decisions. They are interacting with sensitive data. The attack surface for security is no longer that static. It keeps evolving in the real time, and I think as every security organization or CISO's responsibility is evolving to secure the entire AI lifecycle from like ingestion till the model training, deployment, inference, and up-leveling the overall observability governance. So there's a lot of enhancements, there's a lot of up-leveling required, and as you rightly pointed out, like the member trust is going to be the ultimate measure of success. As someone leading the trust and safety organization for Intuit Credit Karma, I feel every AI decision touches users. So reliability, transparency, accountability are also something that the modern CISOs in the era of AI are going to be responsible for, right? Like the CISOs are no longer just wearing the security hat, but now they're kind of like the navigators in this uncharted water of guiding innovation, but in a very safe and secure environment. If you look at the recent OWASP top 10s as well, it very clearly calls out misinformation. It very clearly calls out hallucinations and stuff. So this is where the member trust becomes like the core of the overall day-to-day operations, where if you think Credit Karma as an example, where we're responsible for providing financial guidance to more than 140, 150 million customers, providing one wrong guidance could impact their financial life. And this is where the information is generated through AI. So how do we make sure the information is more accurate? There is no misinformation, there's no hallucination to it. So our CISO's life is no longer just on the securing these AI life cycles and stuff, but also making sure they are providing the right context and and the trust is ensured through this. So it's a completely new era, and I'm really excited and glad to be part of this era and this journey.
Chaitanya, I'm glad you brought up this notion of trust, right? And both Glean and Credit Karma at the end of the day are, your technology companies, and trust really comes from being able to trust the code that is being used to deliver the outcomes to the end users. I'm going to start this with you, Chaitanya. In our conversation, you mentioned, you have thousands of developers. You've been using vibe coding tools now, for multiple quarters, have been experimenting and using multiple vibe coding tools. How has vibe coding changed sort of the SDLC and DevSecOps at Credit Karma, and how do you deal with that as a security practitioner?
Yeah, I think honestly, if I just speak about Credit Karma, first of all, how are we doing vibe coding? I think we are very actively using the AI assisted. I'll use AI assisted coding because a lot of industrial practitioners do not like vibe coding. They like to prefer calling it more of like AI assisted coding. So we tend to use it in a very smart and secure way. We have experimented and we will keep experimenting with different AI assisted coding tools to understand how do they accelerate our environment, but in a very much secure and isolated environment. We have different pods of users trying and experimenting different tools, the capabilities, and how does it clearly and very well integrates into our engineering workflows and the environment. But speaking from the security perspective, like, yes, the adoption is great. Everybody loves it. There are certain percentage of code being generated by AI. But from security perspective, this is what I truly feel is that AI assisted coding is a kind of a double-edged sword. On one edge, it does supercharge the whole development environment. It does empower developers to avoid those repetitive tasks. It can make dramatic shifts in the productivity. But on the other edge, we do see it introducing vulnerabilities too. I was recently reading this very interesting cybersecurity report published by CSET that clearly called out, like, during the analysis of more than 100 language models, they found more than 48% of them, more than 48% of the code generated are vulnerable. What really scared me was that 22% of the packages included in these code does not even exist. If you think about this for a second, it does disrupt your dependency management and open up gates for supply chain security and stuff. These attacks are not new. Security has been fighting against these for years, but if with vibe coding coming in, it does make it much easier for these kind of vulnerabilities to easily sneak into the code. And the second biggest problem that I feel could be a huge challenge for security is the scaling. Over the years, security has relied on peer reviews, code reviews, PR reviews. We use different terminologies for these kind of second opinion on the code before it goes into production. With this AI assisted coding coming in, the sizes of this PR have grown drastically. These are no longer 2 or 3 files with few lines of code modifications. Every PR is a heavy PR with multiple files being affected with a single prompt. If you think about this, it does easily allow users to make mistakes, right? There is a very easy way for vulnerabilities to again be introduced and sneak in to production. So those are some of the 2 big challenges that we feel. And again, like, we all have a responsibility to up-level our DevSecOps workflow at this point, right? And that is the way shift left is going to become much more mandatory, not just important at this point. We need to sit where this code is generated. We need to have our scanners, our SCA scanners, our code scanners clearly sit where this is generated. we need to clearly identify or tag human-generated code versus AI-generated code to be able to clearly distinguish what is trustworthy, what is not trustworthy at this point. So just like every other ecosystem, I think the code development environment is also being disrupted with the introduction of vibe coding.
Switching, to you, Sunil, in some ways, Lean had the opportunity of designing your SDLC for the AI era in some in some ways, and you've been using this now for multiple years. You've talked about how 20 to 40% of the code that you generate is now AI assisted, and the volume of code that is being generated is now 3 to 5x what it was before. How has that impacted your view on SDLC and DevSecOps? And how have you been? At one level, Glean is competing with startups that are building their products on vibe coding, right? And at the same time, you have to build products that are enterprise grade security for some of the leading regulators. So, would love to get your perspective on how do you balance that.
I tend to divide this thing into three parts. We talked about coding assistance, we talked about vibe coding, and we're talking about SDLC. So, Glean, of course, we started as a company in 2019. So, we had a couple of years before, actually ChatGPT came about, correct? So, we had a mature code base. So, we absolutely have adopted coding assistants. We have been using GitHub Copilot for a couple of years. We use Cursor, we use Claude Code nowadays. So, that's where we have seen a lot of success. So, good 90+% of our engineers are using coding assistants. As the term says, those are assistants, correct? Working on a large code base. And, you got to follow the same practices. Finally, the engineers still own the code, correct? So whatever code that they're going to create a pull request, they're still blessing it, correct? So use the coding assistant, look at the code before you create a pull request. And on the other side, those pull requests, before they are required to be merged in, needs to be reviewed by another entity, another human being. Vibe coding is generally what we have seen is more for newer projects, more POC, rapid prototyping is where we have seen success. And some of the other place, so that adoption is somewhat, I would say, low to medium within the company. But the other thing that I'm really excited about is the impact on the entire SDLC. That goes way beyond coding. As we know, SDLC starts way before, correct? When you're coming up with the product requirement document, you're coming up with the engineering requirement document, correct? Then you do coding, which is an important part. But then you got to be testing it. You got to be deploying it, and then you got to be maintaining it. Now that's your entire SDLC process. I'm very excited about that in addition to coding assistant. Why? Because all the existing tools like Cursor, like Claude, with the ability to bring in MCP, they are helping with the rest of the SDLC process. When you're coding, you never code in isolation. You need to code in the context of the business problem you're trying to solve. That's what all these coding assistants are bringing in. So overall, I'm very excited about the impact that the coding assistants are having on the SDLC. Now, the security part of the SDLC is definitely, I agree with Chaitanya, currently the code being generated, again, have read similar reports, 45% of the code being generated had security vulnerabilities. Now, right now, relatively speaking, we are in that chaotic era, correct? New technologies have been introduced, we need to perfect that. But I'm very, very bullish that we will be able to solve by bringing in Gen AI native security tooling. Why? Because the LLMs have a very good understanding of the code base. We have been using, various SAST tools. They have been very noisy. Every developer, the first thing they used to do was turn off those SAST because of the high noise. Now, integrated with LLMs, we're able to boost the signals. Every developer today is drowning in managing the security vulnerabilities in your third-party code, including the kind of issues Chaitanya brought up. Hey, those are ghost dependencies, never existed. You're opening yourself to typo squatting and other attacks for those modules. Now, the same technology that is causing us the deluge of code we need to review, the same technology is going to help us. Why? Because if you need to bump up to the next version, which is a major version which has a code fix, refactoring has become really easy. Although it will generate a huge PR, but that huge PR would have all the right fixes to bump up to the next major version, which has the vulnerability fix. So all in all, yes, right now doesn't feel like, hey, we have created a bigger problem for us, the security professionals. But I would say, going forward, I'm bullish that we'll solve this problem and we'll be in a much better place once those tools exist and we adopt it side by side our coding assistants. So you cannot adopt one without the other.
So now let's switch gears and talk about, AI native applications. Both Credit Karma and Glean, both of your organizations are shipping AI native applications. In the case of Credit Karma, you have AI assisted financial advisors that are giving advice to consumers. In the case of Glean, you're shipping these applications that are being used by some of the largest enterprises, and some enterprises are then using your platform to build, consumer facing applications. So let's talk about how you are approaching securing your AI native applications. And Chaitanya, why don't we start with you first?
Sure, Rahul. So as we spoke in one of the previous questions too, I think with the introduction of AI applications coming in, we no longer follow a linear SSDLC anymore. It's very dynamic. It's very data driven. It's constantly evolving. We are securing data ingestion, model deployment, inference phases. So technically, I think the traditional DevSecOps gates, they still matter, but they have to be very much adaptive at this point. And as the models are learning, as the data is shifting, the risks are dynamically flowing throughout in any of the phases of this application. Credit Karma has been actively deploying, as you rightly pointed out, AI applications, much more interactive with customers. They go through a rigorous training and intensive testing exercises. And security has been trying to follow one basic fundamental principle that has not changed, which is involving security early into early phases. So security is not an afterthought. Security has always been a first-class citizen, where we sit through the every development lifecycle phases, and with that, I think it does bring in some of the new attack vectors, but at the same time, as I mentioned before, some of the challenges like supply chain security are not new to us. We have tackled them in the past, and it's just how do we up-level our security? How do we up-level our governance? How do we up-level our observability to fight through these kind of gaps? Two most important pillars that are going to be extremely crucial with this new securing AI applications that we heavily rely on is data security and API security. I feel data fuels AI, and I see APIs are more like arteries of AI, right? If either is weak, the system is exposed. So we heavily have been focusing on data quality, and with that, I think we have also invested into sandboxing environment and ensuring that we have like the right data governance wrapped around the entire process of the application development lifecycle or AI development lifecycle, I would say. And secondly, on the API security as well, like observability is going to be extremely important. As I mentioned, how the AI systems are interacting with each other. We had traditional LLMs, and then we entered into agentic AI. Today we are into like more of like agentic AI, where the AI systems are acting as agents, and they're responsible for calling 100 services, pulling all the information on your behalf, and producing more of an information which is much more relevant to you. Which means now one agent is freely roaming into your production environment, pulling data from various services and making various calls to different services. And this is where it becomes extremely important on what data is being touched by this agent. What API is being used to invoke these? Does it have PII in it? Is it exposing someone else's data instead of your data? Right? So those things start becoming a huge challenge for the overall AI security, and that's where I think we have very, very smartly invested into API security and data security initiative on its own, which are powering our umbrella AI security program at Credit Karma. So overall, I feel like it has always been in as long as it's in the sandbox or the controlled environment, we feel much comfortable to have the right level of observability. We feel much comfortable with this AI shipments happening in a much faster pace. But the moment it crosses the boundary is where we have to add additional scrutiny and add additional human eye to it.
Thanks, Chaitanya, for that perspective. But also, I love your analogy, and I'll adapt it a little bit. Data is the oxygen, and APIs are the arteries. We also thank you for your trust in Harness for protecting your arteries and making sure you have the right observability. So I couldn't resist that plug. I'm sorry about that. So over to you, and maybe maybe you can speak to another aspect which I know is very dear and near to you, and you've posted and blogged about it, which is how do you give end users trust when using AI native applications, especially when these applications are non-deterministic, they're prone to hallucinations and all of that. And how do you approach that from a security perspective?
Yeah, very good question. First of all, big plus one to everything Chaitanya said, that how the entire threat modeling for AI applications, correct? At a certain level, they are the same, correct? You do your design reviews, your threat model. You do your static analysis, dynamic analysis, you deploy, you observe. However, I would say the focus shifts slightly on which are the components that you emphasize more. So how do we bring in trust for our customers? So two fundamental things. As a data is the oxygen, correct? That data fuels everything. Within Glean, what we did was, right from the get-go, we said, whenever you're providing an application to our customers, make sure that you at all times respect permissions. That means through Glean or any Gen AI application that the user is using, they can only access the data that they're privy to, nothing more. Correct? That's the data governance that Chaitanya talked about. That's paramount. If you fail that, nothing else works. That's one. The second is now LLMs themselves are non-deterministic. So even if Rahul has access to certain data, but Rahul is asking a question, and if the response that he gets back is potentially hallucination, and Rahul makes a decision either himself or another agent looks at the data and then makes a decision on that. Now that could be disastrous. So what you do is, how do you increase the trust in the data? So what we do, we take a multi-pronged approach. First of all, we instruct the LLMs. We first fetch the right kind of data and provide it to the LLMs through the RAG architecture, the retrieval augmented generation. So you do not provide irrelevant data, because LLMs are known that if you provided garbage, it will generate garbage. So you have to provide the right data. Second thing, you got to make sure that you instruct the LLM to base its answer only on the data that's provided and nothing else. Then, when it generates the answer, you provide a line-by-line citation back to the user that, okay, I'm generating this answer, and this was based on this data that I sourced from X, Y, and Z, and which are from your enterprise corpus, hence trusted. And then you also use tricks like LLM as a judge. to use another LLM to say, hey, this was the user's question, this was the response, this was the data fed in. You tell me, did I answer the user's question correctly, completely, and based on the data? So you use all these techniques to make sure that even though the underlying technology is non-deterministic, you are bringing a semblance of determinism on top of that. And then, last but not the least, if you are feeding that data into an agentic system, and that agentic system is going to take potentially state-changing decisions, then you bring the human in the loop. That, hey, I am planning to update the Salesforce record, or I am planning to drop a particular table. This could be potentially damaging. Do you approve? So you always bring the human in the loop for those kind of things. If it is more about summarizing, which is just read-only operation, yes, you could potentially get it wrong, but the human will autocorrect, correct? Because by following the citation. So it's a multi-pronged approach you have to take to bring in a little bit more trust into this agentic system.
Thank you, Sunil. I know, this has been such a engaging conversations. All three of us can continue this for several hours, but I'm also mindful of your time. So I'm going to, bring this discussion to an end. So for folks, there you have, two leading practitioners of AI, two leading practitioners of, using AI for security and securing AI, sharing their perspectives. Hopefully you found this really, really interesting and helpful. This is going to be the tone of the conversations for the rest of the summit. This is really a practitioner-focused summit. It's not really about trying to do product pitches and trying to sell you something quite yet. Although hopefully we hope you'll come back for that. One last comment. We've just launched a new state of the AI native application security survey. We will be sending that to everybody who attends the event today. So thank you all. And with that, we will call this discussion to an end. Thank you, Sunil, and thank you, Chaitanya.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you.